Welcome back to another episode of the Contagious Culture Podcast. I am your host, Kyle King, and the goal of this podcast is simple: to help you create an ecosystem, an environment where people thrive. Look, today's conversation is one that I've been looking forward to for a long time. My guest, Adam Tim, president and founder of the Healthy Dispatcher, former LAPD 911 dispatcher, leadership consultant, speaker, and author of multiple books, including Dispatcher Stress, 50 Lessons on Beating Burnout, and People-Driven Leadership, How the Best 911 Centers Inspire Positive Change. This gentleman has spent over a decade, literally over a decade, on the front lines of emergency response. And instead of walking away from the stress, like many of us probably would have, he built a movement focused on wellness, a movement focused on leadership, a movement focused on sustainable performance in the most demanding environments imaginable. Today, we're talking about burnout. We're talking about people-centered leadership. We're talking about how you as an organizational leader, whether you are in a school, a nonprofit, or a business and a public agency, can learn from the culture of emergency response. Adam, how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thanks, Kyle. Great to be here.
Oh, thank you so much. Thank you so much. Look, you have an extensive career and you have done some really, really neat things. What gets you most excited in 2026, starting off the year? What are you most excited to do, to create, and to have this year?
Wow. I mean, we've been doing our work outside of the 911 center for the last 13 years or so, and each year just keeps getting better. We get to help more team members, develop more leaders. We're doing more and more culture consulting, where we're actually going into 911 centers, looking at the aspects of the organizational culture that are additive, that are detracting from the overall mission, and helping them make adjustments so that they can create a culture that people want to be a part of, which then affects retention, and it affects morale, and ultimately affects the quality of work. And the quality of work in 911 is lives saved. So every year it feels like we go from strength to strength. So I feel very grateful to be sitting here looking at another fantastic year on the calendar.
There's a lot of times that we look at leaders, especially on these podcasts or shows or speaking engagements, and we focus so much on the titles. We focus so much on what they've done professionally, and we don't really peel the curtain back on who they are and what was the slingshot moment that got them to where they are today. Adam, why this work, and what was the moment or the series of events that got you to where you are today?
Well, working under the headset, so as a 911 dispatcher, you sit at a console. There's 5 or 6 or 7 screens, depending on the way the agency lays the console out. And you're wearing a headset, and the calls come in, or the radio broadcasts from field responders, field units come in. And so you're sitting there working under the headset. During my 10 and a half years as a dispatcher for LAPD Communications Division, I struggled with the job. And most specifically struggle with the burnout resulting from taking on my thoughts. It wasn't about the caller's complaints. It wasn't about the caller's emergencies. It was more about my thoughts regarding what was being reported to me. And you may not know this, but in communities all across the country, 70% of calls to the 911 system are non-emergency in nature, meaning, yes, they need police response. Yes, they are important matters, but they don't amount to what you would call a code 3 lights and sirens, life and death emergency. About 30% of calls placed to the 911 system are that type of an emergency. And so the other 70%, they fall into various boxes of urgent but not life-threatening, like a crime just occurred, no follow-up information, not urgent, not life-threatening, like a loud party, like my 8-year-old won't obey the house rules, like the ice cream truck is too loud, can you have them move down the street, and things of this nature. And I had a real tough time working with the citizens who were reporting those types of matters, because I didn't feel they met my criteria for what I thought was a valid concern or complaint that you would call the police for. And as a result of my thinking around that, my resistance to helping these callers, my judgment of them, and look, on this side of things, we're all fighting our own battles, and I was in the wrong for being judgmental in my thinking in that way. However, I hadn't identified what I was losing or missing out on by thinking that way until I started to realize that my ulcer was tied to that thinking and resistance, that my tension headaches and my discipline record were all tied to the way I was internalizing that struggle. So you call me and you say, I'm calling for the 5th time on this loud party and my baby can't sleep. And I'm working 911 and I'm thinking, I can't believe that I have to listen to this and I'm getting all tense. And that is an internal struggle that is on me. And it wasn't until my 3rd complaint, which got me suspension days, that I realized, and so you think, you asked about this kind of turning point. It was years of bad habits. So the first 7 years working as a 911 call taker, I had these bad habits in place. And it wasn't until the 7-year mark that I got that 3rd complaint where the habits could no longer be sustained if I expected to keep my good paying city job. And so it was about that time I accepted an invitation to join a mindfulness-based stress reduction class. It was a 6-week class, and I needed to try something because I was about to get fired. I couldn't afford to lose my good paying city job. It's expensive to live in LA, even as a single man at the time. I was about 30 years old during this period. And that 6-week mindfulness class, it changed my life. I learned how to be with myself. I learned that I had more power and control over the things that I viewed as nonsensical slights that got under my skin and whether they got under my skin. I had more power and control over my shoulders, which were frequently like this, and my internal tension. And within that 6-week class, I was confronted with a lot of opportunities to change my approach. I was brought to awareness, but awareness only allows us the opportunity to choose. And I chose to take action. And within 6 months of that class, my life had transformed because I continued to endeavor the practices. I continued to sit for 10 minutes once a day before going to the dispatch center. I continued to write in my journal while sitting at the console. And if a caller got me riled up, instead of taking it out on the next caller, I would pause for a second, write in my journal, kind of offload those aggressions onto pages so that I could reset and show up for the next call. And I was so amazed after that 6-month period that on paper, nothing had changed, yet everything was different. And it was this practice. And so amazed by this that I wrote a proposal to start a mindfulness-based stress reduction program at the dispatch center. So this is about 8 years in then. So it took me about a year to do the work to demonstrate what I was talking about, because it would be very interesting to have someone who has achieved formal discipline and complaints from the citizenry to pitch a program like, hey, let's all chill out. But I had to demonstrate that I was different. And I handed this proposal to the watch commander at the time, who was one of my early mentors, who had seen this transition. He said, I've seen the difference. I'll support this. Make sure you get the captain's approval. So I went to the Captain Justice, real name. I said, Captain Justice, I want to do this thing. He said, I'll support anything that will make life easier around here. Want to start next week? And that next week, I told my story for the first time to my coworkers. In the pre-shift meeting, there was 50 or 60 of my team members coming on shift. And I basically told the story of going from angry Adam, as I later learned that my coworkers were calling me behind my back, to something different. And I said, so if you two want to be more relaxed, a better parent, sibling, spouse, dispatcher, or whatever roles matter to you, then join me for the first of this series of sessions. And that first 15-minute guided breathing session is what the program amounted to weekly in cadence. That first session had 40 of my coworkers. And I don't think it was anything that I was doing or who I was in the moment. It was something that they heard for themselves. And now at this point, that was like, I think 16 years ago when I invited people into this vision of what they could have for themselves. And for a couple more years, I worked at the dispatch center, building my speaking chops, building my ability to design training curriculum. I went to a few classes and in-depth programs. And after 10 and a half years working for the city of LA with the LAPD, I left and I launched the Healthy Dispatcher. And now I've been doing this for 13, 14 years, which it started as training classes around stress resilience and burnout, specifically for dispatchers. And over the last decade or so, we've grown our company offerings. But it was that personal struggle. I'm fully of the mind that our greatest gift is found in our deepest wounds. The cracks are where the light shines through, and it was only through really struggling and soul searching. I was sitting there wondering why I continued to make my life more difficult than it had to be. And it wasn't until I really practiced daily the mindfulness practice that I was able to come up with some real answers and then do something about it.
Adam, that was a lot. It was so much value packed in what you were communicating, and there's a few things that I want to just highlight. One, I love how you talked about earlier about this resistance that you had and this perspective of judgment when people would be calling in. You were vulnerable and transparent that you went through essentially 7 years of, I circled it, of bad habit. But then you recognize and you were introspective and recognized that those habits couldn't be sustained. And in those habits not being able to be sustained, you recognize and went through this program or through this class that you had to realize this power and control struggle that allowed you to change your approach, move from awareness to action, pause, offload, reset, and go from angry Adam to this man that was demonstrating different, in recognizing in all of this that our greatest gift is found in some of these deepest wounds and pain that we experience. With someone that is showing up every day, exemplifying their wounds and their actions, exemplifying those bad habits, and it's costing their team, their culture, their productivity, or even the response that they should be having in showing up with whomever they're serving, what would be the first step or the first few steps that individual leader or that team member should take to be able to move more effectively from awareness to action?
Well, I think there's two dimensions there. So if you're the team member or the person who, like I was as angry Adam, who's struggling and people are annoying, the world is annoying, and it just sucks around here, then you have an opportunity, because I find that, I found, and this was the most stark message that I learned through this process, this early process. I was the common denominator when I was blaming everybody else for the way things were turning out. I was blaming the callers for being so stupid, and my coworkers for being so lazy, and my supervisors for gunning for me. And I was really surprised to learn that it was me all along, and that I had coworkers who had no problem whatsoever dealing with the very same callers and the very same complaints, and they did so with kindness and compassion and a ready attitude. And I had supervisors that really cared, and I missed those opportunities because they're gunning for me, even though I was giving them the ample ammunition to gun for me. So that's the first step. If things are difficult, I'm not discounting that we are all fighting a hard battle. That is truth. However, if it is such that our perceptions about petty annoyances shapes our worldview to the extent that we can find no joy anywhere, there's an opportunity there. And it wasn't until that message was impacting my pocketbook. Like I served unpaid suspension days, and that was the warning sign. Like I was very dense, so I needed a very strong warning sign, lights and sirens. I believe your viewers and listeners are much more perceptive and better able to read the tea leaves, as it were. You don't need to get divorced. You don't need to have your world falling down to say, hey, maybe I should change something. And so if you're looking at the opportunity for change, and it's subtle, I'm of the mind that if we make incremental changes over the days ahead, it lands us in a completely different place. You don't have to throw the baby out with the bathwater or completely reinvent yourself. It's not about heroic striving effort. It's more about what can I do today to take on a different perspective, a subtle shift. So that's for the individual. And if you're a leader and you supervise someone who, from your perspective, by the way, it's much easier to see this in others than it is to see in ourselves. So from your third party objective viewpoint, you see this person is definitely making their life more difficult each and every day. Then there's an opportunity for you to lean into conversations around what that looks like for them from their perspective. I was fortunate after I got my third complaint to have that complaint managed by a couple of supervisors who really did take an active interest in what was going on with me. They leaned into asking questions. They rather than the micromanaging, fear-based boss who is authoritarian and says, "Hey, you better shape up or ship out," which inflames our defenses and doesn't usually get anyone anywhere. Leading with a question, saying, "Hey, this seems like to be a pattern of behavior that's been demonstrated over time. What's going on? Are there challenges that you're going through? Is there anything that I can help you with?" And leaning into a people-driven leadership approach with these so-called bad apples, it's really the only thing you can do aside from punishing them out of the organization, which also doesn't beget the best results because that creates rifts in the culture and shows that we're going to lead with discipline as opposed to leading with a more people-oriented approach. So it's a conversation, and I don't think that there's any quick fixes. There's no silver bullet on both sides. If you're the individual or you're the leader of said individuals, we do have to start though somewhere. Start leaning in and getting curious.
When you think about this work, especially with working with leaders, and I love what you mentioned that you have to lead with, leading with a question as a leader is important. But when you think about the leaders that you've worked with, what do you find that they fundamentally misunderstand in doing this work, especially with trying to empower a team in this work as well?
I find one of the most common misunderstandings is that the other person doesn't think like you do. And because they think differently and see the world differently, it is not a deficiency. It is not a generational difference that's incorrect. It's not because they don't want to work hard. It's not because kids these days. It's because they just think differently. And the best leaders in my industry, the 911 communication center industry, are the ones who are best able to continually adjust their approach to any person that's in front of them. And they do that by using their emotional intelligence, by asking questions, by getting curious, by being genuinely inquisitive about the person in front of them, instead of going in already loaded with the answers. They're going in with a desire to understand.
Adam, let me ask you this, and I love this idea of emergency response and the work that you've done. Is there any way that team members or leaders, or even myself, and you challenge me, can do certain things and put certain systems in place or create certain types of climate and culture so that there doesn't have to be an emergency response, so that we can be able to create preventative measures before there's even an emergency that happens within the organization that leads people to burnout or resignations or write-ups and all of these different disciplinary issues?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you use the kind of like the emergency that we have, the fire. In my mind, I think the fires within the organization. Like if we spend all of our time as leaders putting out fires, it gives us no time for proactive measures like, "Hey, how you doing?" Which it seems weird that that's a proactive measure that we would somehow down what's the word, or deprioritize when we're putting out fires, but it also makes sense. And so when I think of the proactive steps that the best leaders deploy on a regular basis, it is really about communication. Do you, on a regular, and I mean weekly basis, several times a week, come in and check in with people for no gaining idea, no reason behind it, except to truly understand your people? One of the leaders that I interviewed for my leadership book, which came out a few years ago, I had heard of her impact and her legacy before I invited her, and her name is Melanie. Before I invited her into a conversation, which became the conversation that I cited in the leadership book. From her people are like, "Hey, you really need to talk to our executive director. She's amazing. We love her. We love working for her." And I invited her into a conversation, and I asked her one particularly pointed question. I said, "What's something that you do that is like your calling card, that is kind of a symbol of how you lead?" And she thought for a moment, and she said, "Well, I take it upon myself to know something personal about every single one of my employees." And I knew she worked for a large agency, and so I was kind of baffled by this. And just to make it clear to me in my mind, I said, "Well, how many people do you have?" She said, "I have 140 full-time team members." And I said, "You know something personal about every single one?" She said, "Yeah, that's my job." Like, that's such a distillation, a crystallization, like all the goodness is right there. Like, and she does this, and people know that she knows something personal. She walks on the floor, and this is a 24-hour operation. She even once a month works a graveyard shift because she needs to know what her entire operation is thinking and feeling under her leadership. And if I talked to a lot of centers where the admin team, once they promoted, they've never seen 3 a.m. in the center. It's fine. It's fine. They're busy. They got their stuff. They got their inbox. And it may not be within the purview of their new role. However, if you are a leader of a 24-hour operation and it's been 10 years since you saw the shift that doesn't coincide with your day shift hours, it sends a message just on its face. I'm not telling you you're wrong. I'm not telling you it's bad. I'm not telling you you're a bad leader. It just sends a message. And the best leaders are very attuned to the perceptions that they are shaping by the way they show up.
You know, Adam, I really appreciate you sharing that. It's really helped me reflect. You know, in education, I came from the educational field. And as a teacher, a former teacher years ago, I knew something personal about every single one of my students. But as I challenged myself and even hold myself accountable, I did not know something personal about all of my colleagues. And I wonder, even if the principal that we reported to, I would see her walk through the hallways and dap up students and hug other students and have conversations with students. It's like she knew everyone, but I know there wasn't a moment where we had a personal conversation. And it's interesting that we focus so much as business owners, as leaders, on the person that we're serving, not recognizing the person that we're also serving is the people that we work with and collaborate with on projects. And one of the things that you said earlier is people-driven leadership approach. And I love that. But for our listeners, and even for myself, how would you define what people-driven leadership looks like? And what does that really mean to you?
Well, I break it down in the book into 5 different key characteristics, but if I could sum it up in like the 30-second elevator speech, I would say it's the courage to care every single day, not just when you're feeling it, not just when you had your Starbucks, not just when you're doing the thing that you like about the job, but every single day you care and you show that care and concern for your people. In my profession specifically, because we're working in public safety and because we're fielding calls day in and day out by a population that needs varying degrees of help. Everyone who works in 911 has a very sophisticated BS detector. And that's not only articulated and put into action as a tool on the phones every single day, but also is how they view the world and the leaders with which they spend time with every single day. And if you fake this care and concern, people see right through it. And I'm doubled and tripled down, and my niche is 911 emergency communications. So I can speak educatedly on that. And I know from my own experience, I have seen leaders try to fake authenticity. They have tried to fake care and concern. I know when someone in a leadership role, a supervisor or manager or what have you, has gone to a conference and they took a leadership session, and the leadership breakout session speaker said, like I do at the conferences all across the country, you got to care about your people. You got to do this, 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 and this. And I can see that they came back from the conference brimming with hope and optimism that this is the week, the month, the year that I'm going to be the leader that my people need. And then after about 2 weeks, they putter out and they're like, they didn't change, so I don't need to keep this up. And what they fail to notice that it takes 6 to 9 months of diligent practice. If you're going to try on something new, try on some new approach to leadership, some new way of interacting with your people, it's going to take 6 to 9 months before people start to trust that you mean what you say. It's going to take a year to a year and a half for them to see that this is the new normal. Wow. And I use that timeline even when it comes to change initiatives, organizational change initiatives, when it comes to culture, when it comes to inventing and implementing new processes. The initial 6 to 9 months, if you're leaning in for an entire 6 to 9 months, every single day, you're doing the right thing, fighting the good fight, you'll make some initial gains in the first 6 to 9 months. That's when people go, actually, it's not just an experiment this time. They mean what they say. It takes another 6 to 12 months for those early gains to begin to root themselves into the way things are. And as you know, because this is the Contagious Culture podcast, culture is the way things are. Only by changing the behaviors that shape the way things are, and then continually manifesting or practicing those behaviors, will we change culture. And that takes time. It takes time to cultivate the psychological safety, for people to relax into the new behaviors. It takes time for people to try it on and make it their own. And what we often do is expect things to happen immediately. Culture is not like that. It takes years for culture to manifest. Luckily, it doesn't take years for culture to change. It does take 12 to 18 months of diligent action, but it doesn't take as long to back out of a culture that we want to change as it took for the way we've always done it to kind of rule the day.
Let me ask you this. When you think about if today was day one, and I am a leader listening in right now, and I'm like, Adam, I love everything that you're communicating. I want to start this culture of change to a lot of the emergencies and fires that we are experiencing within our organization, I recognize that it's going to take 12 to 18 months. What do you see as some of the critical steps or stages that have to be in place or have to happen over those 12 to 18 months so that we can ensure and not guarantee, but ensure a change is actually in fact going to happen?
The first step is listening. So creating venues by which people can share what they think. Creating feedback mechanisms, creating town halls, taking time. And in fact, at least 3 of the change initiatives that I wrote about in the leadership book began when a new director came in and spent the first 6 weeks to 6 months, depending on the size of the team, sitting down with every single team member one-on-one and making themselves available and saying, hey, I'm the new director. I'm on your side. And what do you think are the biggest challenges that we face here? And then they take that information and they take action based upon it. Because it's one thing to ask the question, it's another thing to take action. And that begins to prime the pumps of psychological safety that if it was not previously there, begin to form when the leader asks the questions and then the leader takes action. And then from that phase can last 6 to 8 months in itself, just listening, leaning in, talking with people and asking. I'm a huge advocate of leaders not doing everything themselves. Most in leadership roles are type A overachievers, and they think, well, the reason I promoted is because I can change everything. I want to be the supervisor that I never had, and I know that I can make my mark. That is a recipe for burnout. It is not up to you to do everything. In fact, it's much better for your team, for the organization at large, and your own health and sanity to not only delegate, but to delegate the responsibility and the brain power. Like, so inviting people into the mastermind. What do you think we need to do? Where do you work on the front line? I work in my office, and I can't begin to imagine what you're up against. What do you think we need to do? If you had to rank the top 5 challenges that you grapple with on a daily basis, what would you say they are? Awesome. Of these top 2, what's an action I can take today to help alleviate that challenge? And then listen, and then do something with it. And so that initial stage is then how you go to the next stage, which is to create systems and processes by which we can continue to take action in a more formalized and standardized way. We need to have policies and procedures that reinforce what we've decided, because what happens when you, the director or the principal or the top manager, aren't there? It can't be when the cat's away, mice are at play. We need to know that people still know exactly what actions they need to take and how they are reinforcing the new aspects of culture that we are seeking to achieve. It's because it's that shared vision. There's a fantastic book, I'm sure you've read it, called The Leadership Challenge by James Kouzes and Barry Posner.
I haven't read that one.
Really? Oh yeah,
I read that one.
They released the 25th anniversary edition not too long ago, and they boiled down the entire book into 5 key characteristics of exemplary leaders. And one of the key characteristics, and what I'm talking about right now, is that they inspire a shared vision. That's not my vision as the leader. I'm just a facilitator by which we get to achieve our vision of where we're going. It doesn't take me very long when I'm working with an agency to understand aspects of the culture that are preventing the team from coming together. Because when I'm on the floor of a dispatch center and the people on the floor say they, and no one's looking out for us, like that language says there's a rift, there's a divide, and it's usually management, them in their ivory towers over there, and then us who are doing the real work. How do we get people on the same page? How do we get people on the us bus in the right seats, going in the right direction? That's a concept from the Energy Bus, written by John Gordon. I
read that
stole
one.
that. Yeah, that's a great one. So, and then the final phase is maintenance, like maintaining the direction of things. And if you've been successful in listening and then implementing systems and processes by which to reinforce what we learned in the listening phase, then the maintenance is a little bit easier, because it amounts to like nudges. We already have guardrails in place. We're almost like a train on the tracks, and occasionally we'll need to switch the tracks to another direction, but it's more maintenance than it is forging new and blazing new pathways. But it's all that upfront legwork. And that's why that takes 12 to 18 months. And I talk a lot about how it's so important that you spend the time and energy and create the space for the values-driven conversations in the beginning, because so many, again, type A overachievers, we want to go in guns blazing, like, oh, you suck, get out, you're either on board or you're off the ship.
Yes.
And then and it doesn't work. No,
yeah.
that actually sends the wrong message, even if the people that and I've seen this in every organization. There are people that do need to leave, or they need to turn over a new leaf. And you don't have to fire them, punish them, create an uncomfortable environment for others because of needing to handle I call them the toxic 10%. These are the most vocally negative people. They typically amount to about 10% of the total working population. So they're very much in the minority. What we think we have to do, though, is amplify the attention that we focus on that minority, and it's at the expense of the majority. The silent majority wants things to change, will advocate for change if we can create the psychological safety that makes that possible for them to also be advocates, but they will also remain silent because they have for the last several years. So we have to make sure that we're telling the full story, that the toxic 10%, when they think they speak on behalf of everybody, only really speak on behalf of themselves, but they're good at drumming up support for their mission and their message. And that the 90%, you're like, yeah, hey, I heard you the first time, we're working on it. And then we work to the 90% and say, what do you think? And the 90% is usually so unused to being asked what they think, which is why they've remained silent all these years anyway, that they go, I don't know. Can you get back to me? And then get back to them, because it may take a few asks to really get them talking, especially if your culture says, if you say anything, you're a management sympathizer. And that us versus them dynamic is so pervasive that even the people who want to contribute to the good things, and even leaders who are good at soliciting viewpoints, can't get those people on board. It's the culture is determining the way things are. That just takes time. That also is malleable, and it can feel frustrating. I talk to a lot of leaders who are like, Adam, I heard what you said. I went to a breakout session last year and I asked my people, they don't say anything. What do I do? Just keep asking. Just keep at it. Just keep demonstrating.
Adam, I want to do a rapid fire exercise. I'm going to say a statement and I want you to finish it. This should be fun. Burnout is less about workload and more about what?
Mindset.
The fastest way to lose your best people?
Ignore them.
People don't leave organizations, they leave.
Bad bosses.
And the leadership behavior that looks strong but actually destroys culture?
Artificial busyness.
Tell me more about that one. I need to hear that one.
So John Kotter, who's like the godfather of organizational change management, Kotter, all of his books are fantastic. He talks about cultivating a sense of urgency when it comes to change initiatives. And one thing that will torpedo a true sense of urgency more than anything is a false sense of fake urgency, which is keeping ourselves so busy that we can't tend to the most important things. And as we've been talking, the most important aspects of your organization are the people. So if I say as a leader, oh, I'm listening to this podcast, I would love to come down from my office and talk to my people, but who's going to answer my emails? Who's going to who's going to go to the budget meeting? Who's going to do all the things that are my job to do? And we will manifest busyness in the form of tasks. And then we will say, because of the tasks on my plate, I can't prioritize these other things. And when we get there, whatever that date is, which never happens, by the way, that's when we'll prioritize the most meaningful tasks. My argument is that if you don't prioritize the people today, now, you will continue, if you're already circling the drain, running on the hamster wheel of turnover and negative culture, nothing's going to change. So it's important to prioritize what's most important. And I trust that the leaders tuning in here know what's most important and deprioritize the tasks that look important but aren't actually important. Like if your type A overachieving mind says, I have to answer every single email that drops in my inbox within 30 minutes, incorrect. It can wait a couple of days, and you can go out to the classroom and talk with the person who's struggling because they need to see you.
Adam, this was amazing, man. I have 6 pages of notes. Wow. My mind is blown, and I just want to thank you so much for giving your heart, giving your wisdom, and just showing up and delivering so much information that is tangible, tactical, and practical that people can actually implement today. Adam, where can we find you, and how can we support some of your initiatives in the future?
Well, this has been a pleasure. Just let me say that, Kyle. I love the conversation, and it's a lot of fun talking to you. So thanks for making it easy. You can find me and information on my company at thehealthydispatcher.com. We refer to ourselves as THD, as in thehealthydispatcher.com. I'm very available on LinkedIn and in Facebook and whatever other social feeds. If you look me up, I'm all over the place. And I've got 3 books. 2 of them are for 911, but the principles hold true for any organization where the people really matter. My most recent book is called People-Driven Leadership: How the Best 911 Centers Inspire Positive Change. If you do a search for my name on Amazon, you'll see all of my books there as well. And also, I'm very available if anyone listening wants to reach out to me and ask any specific questions. Shoot me an email at adam@thehealthydispatcher.com. I'm at your service.
Adam, thank you so much. And for anyone listening, if your people are burning out, disconnecting, or quietly disappearing, the question isn't what's wrong with them. It's not a them problem. It's probably a you problem. And a question that I want you to consider today after talking to Adam is, what's your culture that you've designed and developed that they're carrying on a day-to-day basis? One of the questions that we always ask on the Contagious Culture podcast is, what type of culture are you spreading? The energy you bring is the culture you create. Make yours worth catching. It's another episode of the Contagious Culture podcast. I'm your host, Kyle King, and we look forward to seeing you guys next episode.